Ambassador Kethver stretched his forearms and yawned. The emergency meeting had been going on for 6 hours. Around the huge, circular table, representatives from 12 different species argued in their native languages. The translation devices worked overtime, filling the air with clicking, buzzing, and whistling sounds. "The Centauri Gate network is completely down," announced General Mortax, his scales turning dark red with anger. "3 of my battle fleets are stranded in empty space. They have food for maybe 2 weeks. Food?" laughed Dr. Zinwe, her crystalline body flashing with bitter colors. "My research station lost life support yesterday. 60,000 scientists are breathing recycled air that gets worse every hour. The atmospheric processors just stopped working." Kethver rubbed his tired eyes. 50 years he had been an ambassador. 50 years of dealing with trade disputes, border conflicts, and resource allocation, but nothing like this. In the past 6 months, everything had started falling apart. And nobody knew why. Has anyone figured out what caused this? Asked Prime Minister Velkas, her tentacles writhing with worry. "Our best engineers have been working around the clock." Silence filled the room. That was the problem. Their best engineers had no idea what was wrong. The technology was too complex, too advanced, too ... "Human," whispered Dr. Z in single quotes. "WEH. The word hung in the air like a curse. Kethver felt his stomach drop. He had hoped nobody would make that connection. But of course they would. The timeline was too obvious to ignore. "The humans left exactly 8 months ago," continued Dr. Zinwe. "And 6 months ago, everything started breaking down." "That's impossible," snorted General Mortax. "Humans were. Just servants, manual laborers. They fixed pipes and cleaned floors. They couldn't possibly ... His voice trailed off. Everyone in the room was thinking the same thing, could they? Kethver accessed his personal files through his neural implant. Video records from the last human departure flashed through his mind. He had been there that day, watching from his office window as the massive transport ships lifted off from the capital world. The ships had been huge, much bigger than they needed to be for just carrying people. And there had been so many of them. Hundreds of vessels, all different designs, all heading toward the edge of known space. The humans had filed proper departure papers. They had given the required 30-day notice. They had fulfilled all their contracts perfectly, but they had been so quiet about it. No protests, no demands. No emotional speeches about freedom or justice. They had simply packed up and left, like they were going on vacation. "I need to show you something," Kethver said finally. He activated the room's main display screen. "This is security footage from the central power station on Kepler 442b. The date is 3 days ago." The screen showed a massive industrial complex. Fusion reactors the size of buildings hummed with barely contained energy. The station provided power to the entire system. Billions of people depended on it. "Watch Reactor 7, Kethver said. On the screen, warning lights began flashing around. One of the reactors. Automated systems tried to compensate, but something was wrong. The magnetic containment field flickered. Emergency protocols activated, but they seemed to make things worse. Within minutes, the entire reactor went into automatic shutdown. Our engineers spent 2 weeks trying to restart it," Kethver explained. "They finally succeeded yesterday, but look at this." He fast-forwarded the video to show engineers working on the reactor. Dozens of technicians swarmed over the machinery like insects. They replaced components, ran diagnostics, and argued over technical manuals. When they finally got the reactor running again, it lasted exactly 4 hours before shutting down with a different error code. "This is happening everywhere," Kethver continued. "Power stations, water treatment plants, atmospheric processors, space elevators, jump gates, everything the humans used to maintain." "But they were just following our instructions," protested Velkas. "We told them what to fix and how to fix it." Kethver pulled up another file. This one showed a human maintenance worker named Sarah Chun. She looked ordinary enough. Medium height, brown hair, wearing the standard gray coveralls of a contract laborer. In the video, she was working alone on a quantum computer array that controlled traffic for the entire Vega system. "Look at what she's actually doing," Kethver said. The video zoomed in on Sarah's hands. She wasn't following any manual or checking any diagrams. Instead, she was making tiny adjustments to components that weren't even supposed to be adjustable. Her movements were precise and confident, like she understood the system better than the people who built it. "She's not fixing what we told her to fix," Dr. Zinwe observed, her crystal body turning pale blue with shock. "She's modifying the entire architecture." "Exactly," Kethver said. "And this wasn't unusual. I've been reviewing thousands of hours of security footage. The humans were constantly making unauthorized modifications to our systems. Small changes that we never noticed because everything kept working perfectly." The room fell silent again. The implications were staggering. For over 200 years, humans had been the galaxy's favorite servant species. They were cheap to hire, easy to work with, and incredibly good at solving technical problems. Every major civilization employed them for maintenance, construction, and repair work, but if they had been secretly modifying everything they touched, how could we not know? Asked General Mortax. "Don't we have oversight protocols?" Kethver laughed bitterly. "Do you personally inspect every pipe fitting and circuit board in your ship?" "Of course not. You trust the maintenance crew to do their job correctly, and the humans always did. Everything worked better after they touched it, so we never looked deeper." He pulled up one final video. This one showed the main computer core of the Galactic Assembly Building, the heart of interstellar government. The most secure and important computer system in known space. In the video, a human technician was performing routine maintenance. But instead of just cleaning dust and replacing worn parts, he was installing tiny additional components. Microscopic devices that connected to the main data streams. "They were watching us," Kethver said quietly. "For 2 centuries, they had access to everything. Our military secrets, our technological databases, our private communications. And we never suspected because they were just servants." The weight of realization settled over the room like a heavy blanket. The humans hadn't just left. They had taken their knowledge with them. And apparently their knowledge was far more extensive than anyone had imagined. "Where did they go?" asked Velkas. Kethver displayed a star map showing the human exodus routes. The ships had all headed toward the same region of space, a dark nebula beyond the galactic rim where no civilization had ever bothered to explore. "The last transponder signals were received here," he said, pointing to a spot just inside the nebula. "After that, nothing." "We need to contact them," Dr. Zinwe said urgently. "Offer them better contracts, higher pay, full citizenship rights. Whatever they want." Kethver had already tried that. The automated response came back within hours every time he sent a message. Always the same words. "Contract completed. No further obligations exist. Do not contact this frequency again." Outside the conference room windows, the lights of the capital city flickered. Another power grid was failing. In the distance, emergency vehicles rushed toward a collapsed transit tunnel. The carefully maintained perfection of galactic civilization was crumbling one system at a time, and somewhere in the dark between the stars, the humans were building something new. Dr. Vilfari had not slept in 3 days. Her crystalline body, normally a beautiful shade of deep blue, had turned gray with exhaustion. Around her, the emergency research lab buzzed with desperate activity. Scientists from 6 different species worked side by side, trying to solve problems that seemed impossible. "The atmospheric processor on Kepler 186f just failed," announced her assistant, a young Zephyrian named Court. "That's the 3rd one this week." Velthari didn't look up from her work. She was hunched over a human-designed quantum matrix, trying to understand how it worked. The device was supposed to regulate oxygen levels in terraformed atmospheres. It had been working perfectly for 40 years. Now it was dead, and nobody knew why. "How many people on that planet?" she asked. 12 million, Court replied quietly. 12 million people who would slowly suffocate if they couldn't fix the processor, just like the 8 million who had already died on Proxima Centauri B when their life support systems failed, and the 15 million evacuated from the Tau Ceti colonies when their fusion reactors started overheating uncontrollably. The galaxy was dying, one world at a time. "Doctor," called out Professor Haxonal from across the lab. His insect-like body was clicking with agitation. "I think I've found something." Valthari rushed over to his workstation. On the screen was a detailed scan of a human-built component from a water purification plant. The part looked simple enough, a small metal cylinder with some wiring. But the internal structure was unlike anything she had ever seen. "Look at this," Haxonal said, pointing to the scan. "The atomic arrangement is completely artificial. These elements don't naturally form this kind of lattice structure. What does it do?" Valthari asked. "That's the problem. I have no idea. But without it, the water purification process stops working. The plant can't remove toxins from the water supply." Valthari studied the scan more carefully. The component was incredibly sophisticated. Each atom was precisely placed to create a structure that seemed to defy the normal laws of chemistry. Creating something like this would require technology far beyond what any galactic civilization possessed. "How long would it take us to manufacture a replacement?" she asked. Haxonal's antennae drooped. "With our current technology? Maybe 50 years, if we're lucky. 50 years. The people on that world didn't have 50 days. A new alarm began sounding. Valthari looked up at the main status board that dominated one wall of the lab. Red lights were flashing across dozens of star systems. Each light represented another failing piece of infrastructure, another crisis that they couldn't solve. "The hyperspace relay network is down in the Vega sector," reported Dr. Mintak, a tall reptilian scientist. "All communication with 14 colonies is lost. The antimatter containment system on Station Alpha 7 is failing," added Engineer Polrex. "They're evacuating the entire facility." "The weather control satellites around New Terra are malfunctioning," announced Technician Solara. "They're predicting massive storms within hours." Each report hit Valthari like a physical blow. She had thought they were dealing with random equipment failures, bad luck. Old machines finally wearing out, but the pattern was becoming clear. Every single failure involved technology that humans had worked on, and the failures were accelerating. "Pull up the maintenance records," she ordered. "I want to see every piece of equipment that humans serviced in the last 5 years." The computer took several minutes to compile the data. When the results appeared on screen, Valthari felt her crystalline heart skip a beat. The list was enormous. Thousands upon thousands of entries. Power plants, computer systems, transportation, networks, life support facilities, defense grids, manufacturing centers. Humans had touched everything. "Cross-reference this with our current failure reports," she said. "The match was perfect. Every failing system had been maintained by human workers. Not just recently, but consistently over decades. The humans had been integral to keeping galactic civilization functioning." "But they were just following our maintenance schedules," protested Quark. "We told them exactly what to do and when to do it." Valthari pulled up a specific maintenance record. It showed a human worker named Marcus Thompson, servicing a fusion reactor on the industrial world of Kepler 452b, according to the official logs. He had replaced 3 worn components and recalibrated the magnetic field generators. Standard procedure, but when she looked at the security footage from that day, she saw something different. Marcus wasn't just replacing parts. He was upgrading them, installing components that weren't in the original design, making modifications that improved the reactor's efficiency by 15%. They weren't just maintaining our systems, she realized. They were improving them, constantly. She pulled up more records. The pattern was everywhere. Human workers would arrive to fix a simple problem and leave behind technology that worked far better than before. Computers ran faster, engines burned cleaner. Life support systems became more reliable. For over 2 centuries, the humans had. been secretly upgrading galactic civilization. And now those upgrades were failing one by one. Why are they breaking down now? Asked Haxanal. If the humans made everything better, why is it all falling apart? Velthari studied the failure patterns more carefully. There was definitely a sequence to the breakdowns. Systems weren't failing randomly. They were failing in a specific order, starting with the most complex modifications and working backward. I think, she said slowly, the human upgrades had built-in expiration dates. The lab fell silent. Everyone stared at her. Think about it, she continued. They knew they were leaving. They spent decades preparing for their departure, and must have designed their modifications to gradually fail after they were gone. But why? Asked Cord. If they wanted to hurt us, why not just sabotage everything immediately? Velthari considered. The humans had never shown any signs of resentment or anger. They had been model workers, polite, efficient, reliable. They had fulfilled every contract perfectly and left without causing any trouble. Maybe they didn't want to hurt us, she said. Maybe they just wanted to show us how much we depended on them. She pulled up the communication logs from the human departure. The messages were formal and professional. No threats. No demands. Just simple notifications that their contracts were complete and they would be leaving galactic space, but buried in the technical specifications of the transport ships, she found something interesting. The humans had filed cargo manifest listing the equipment they were taking with them: manufacturing tools, computer cores, genetic samples, historical archives. They were taking everything they needed to build a new civilization from scratch. They're not planning to come back, she realized. This isn't a negotiating tactic. They're really gone. The implications were staggering. The humans had been the invisible foundation holding galactic society together. Without them, everything was falling apart. Worlds were becoming uninhabitable. Trade routes were collapsing. Billions of people were in danger, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. A new alarm sounded. This one was different, louder, more urgent. Velthari looked at the status board and felt her blood turn cold. The main computer core of the Galactic Assembly was failing. The system that controlled interstellar government, military coordination, and economic regulation was shutting down. How long do we have? She asked. According to the diagnostic, Court said, his voice shaking, maybe 6 hours. 6 hours before the galactic government collapsed entirely. 6 hours before chaos consumed hundreds of worlds. 6 hours before everything they had built over thousands of years crumbled into dust. Velthari looked around at her fellow scientists. They were the best minds in the galaxy, but they were trying to understand technology that was decades ahead of anything they could comprehend. It was like asking children to repair a starship using stone tools outside the lab. She could see the lights of the capital city flickering. Transportation systems were failing. Communications were sporadic. Emergency services were overwhelmed. The carefully ordered world that had seemed so permanent was revealing itself to be as fragile as a soap bubble, and somewhere in the darkness between stars, the humans were building their own future. Commander Zaxith stood on the bridge of the GSV Harmony, the largest exploration vessel ever built. Around him, holographic displays showed the positions of 300 ships, the greatest fleet in galactic history, all searching for one thing: the humans. 2 years had passed since the Great Collapse began. 2 years of failing systems, dying worlds, and desperate attempts to rebuild what was breaking faster than anyone could fix it. The Galactic Assembly had authorized unlimited resources for this mission. Find the humans, bring them back. Save civilization, but the dark nebula ahead looked empty and hostile. No ship signals, no energy signatures, no signs of life anywhere. Report, Zaxith commanded. Captain Morvex, his second-in-command, approached with datapad in hand. Her scaled face showed worry. Long-range sensors detect artificial structures in the Kepler 1649 system, but they single quotes read ... unusual. Unusual how? See. For yourself? The main display screen activated, showing a distant star system. At first glance, it looked normal. A yellow star with several planets orbiting around it. But as the image enhanced, Zaxith saw something that made his four hearts skip a beat. Massive structures surrounded the star. Not ships or space stations, but enormous geometric shapes that seemed to be collecting energy directly from the solar surface. The scale was incredible. Each structure was larger than most planets. Dyson collectors, whispered Dr. Yelenara, the fleet's chief scientist. But the technology required to build something like that, ... She didn't finish the sentence. Everyone knew what she meant. Only the most advanced civilizations could even dream of building stellar-scale engineering projects. It would take thousands of years and resources from dozens of star systems. How long would it take us to build something like that? Zaxith asked. With our current technology? Dr. Yelenara shook her head. We couldn't. We don't have the materials science, the energy distribution systems, or the construction techniques. It would be like asking primitives to build a starship using wooden tools. But the humans had been gone for only 2 years. How could they have built something so massive in such a short time? Take us closer, Zaxith ordered, but slowly. We don't know what kind of defenses they might have. The fleet moved deeper into the system. As they approached, more structures became visible. Asteroid mining operations that dwarfed anything in galactic space. Manufacturing complexes that stretched across entire moons. And everywhere, the sleek geometric shapes that could only be human technology. Commander, called out the communications officer, we're being scanned. By what? Unknown. The scanning beam is using frequencies we've never seen before. Very sophisticated, very thorough. Zaxith felt his scales prickle with nervousness. The humans knew they were here. But what would they do about it? The answer came quickly. A new contact appeared on the tactical display. A single ship approaching from the direction of the stellar collectors. It was smaller than the flagship, but its design was completely alien. Smooth curves and strange angles that seemed to bend light around them. That's definitely human technology, Dr. Yelenara observed. But it's nothing like the ships they used when they left our space? Incoming communication, announced the communications officer. Put it through. The main screen changed to show a human face, a woman with gray hair and intelligent eyes. She wore a simple uniform that bore no insignia Zaxith recognized. Greetings, she said in perfect galactic standard. I am Captain Sarah Chun of the Human Collective. You have entered our territorial space without permission. Please state your intentions. Zaxith stepped forward. He had practiced this speech during the long journey. Captain Chun, I am Commander Zaxith of the Galactic Assembly. We come seeking dialogue with your people. Our civilizations are facing a crisis that only you can help us solve. Sarah Chun's expression didn't change. What kind of crisis? The infrastructure your people maintained is failing. Billions are dying. We need your expertise to prevent complete collapse. I see. Sarah paused for a moment, as if consulting with someone off-screen. You may dock with our diplomatic station. One ship only, no weapons, and commander? Don't try to scan our installations. Our defense systems are quite sensitive. The communication ended. A set of coordinates appeared on the navigation display, pointing toward a structure that hadn't been there moments before. Somehow, the humans had built a space station while they were talking. Take a shuttle, Zaxith told his crew. Minimum staff. And make sure we follow their rules exactly. An hour later, Zaxith found himself in a conference room that defied his understanding of engineering. The walls seemed to be made of a material that was simultaneously transparent and opaque, showing glimpses of the stellar construction projects outside while maintaining perfect privacy. The furniture adjusted automatically to accommodate his alien physiology. Sarah Chun sat across from him, along with 2 other humans he didn't recognize. One was an elderly man with kind eyes and a slight smile. The other was a younger woman who watched him with the intensity of a predator. Tell me about your crisis, Sarah said without preamble. Zaxith explained everything. The failing systems, the dying worlds, the desperate attempts to repair technology they didn't understand. As he spoke, he watched the humans' faces carefully. They showed no surprise, no shock, no emotion at all. "How many have died so far?" asked the elderly man. "According to our latest reports, approximately 200 million people. But the number grows every day." The younger woman leaned forward. "And you want us to come back and fix everything?" "Yes, we're prepared to offer full citizenship rights, technological exchanges, territorial grants, whatever you want." Sarah Chun smiled, but it wasn't a friendly expression. "What we wanted was to be treated as equals instead of servants. We wanted recognition for our contributions instead of being invisible. We wanted respect instead of condescension." "You have that now," Zaxith protested. "The entire galaxy understands your importance. You would be honored guests wherever you go." "Honored guests?" the elderly man chuckled. "Do you know what we were doing while we worked for you?" Zaxith shook his head. "We were studying you, learning everything about your civilizations, your technologies, your weaknesses. For 2 centuries, we watched and learned and prepared. Prepared for what?" "For this," Sarah said, gesturing toward the window. Outside, the massive stellar collectors continued their work, harvesting energy on a scale that made galactic power systems look like candles. "We were never your servants, Commander. We were your caretakers. We kept your civilizations running, while we decided what to do with you." The words hit Zaxith like a physical blow. "What do you mean?" "We've been spacefaring for over 5,000 years, the younger woman explained. "We reached the stars while your people were still learning. To make fire, we could have conquered the galaxy easily. Instead, we chose to watch and wait." "But why?" "Because conquest is wasteful," Sarah said. "Destruction is easy, creation is hard. We wanted to see if any of you would develop into something worth preserving." Zaxith felt his world shifting beneath him. Everything he thought he knew about galactic history was wrong. The humans weren't a young species that had been lucky enough to develop space travel. They were ancient, advanced beyond imagination. And they had been playing a game that no one else even knew existed. "So you won't help us?" he said quietly. Sarah considered this for a long moment. "We'll provide emergency aid to prevent immediate deaths, food, medicine, temporary power sources, but we won't return to maintain your systems. Then our civilizations will collapse, perhaps. Or perhaps you'll learn to take care of yourselves. We've given you 2 centuries of borrowed time. Use it wisely." She stood up, indicating the meeting was over. "Your people are welcome to settle in the outer systems if they choose. We're always interested in studying different forms of life. But the age of human servitude is over." As Zaxis was escorted back to his shuttle, he caught glimpses of the human installations through the station's strange walls, manufacturing complexes that built ships in minutes, computer systems that processed information faster than entire galactic networks, weapons that could probably destroy stars. The humans hadn't just left galactic civilization. They had outgrown it entirely. During the long flight back to the fleet, Zaxith tried to compose his report. How do you tell an entire galaxy that the species they had treated as servants were actually their superiors? How do you explain that everything they had built was only possible because an ancient race had chosen to help them? And how do you prepare for a future where that help was no longer available? Outside his shuttle window, human ships moved through space with impossible grace, building things that defied imagination, reaching toward distant galaxies with technologies that made faster than light. Travel looked primitive. The galaxy had wanted its servants back. Instead, it had discovered gods. Ambassador Sarah Chun floated in the observation deck of the diplomatic vessel Aspirations, watching the galaxy's largest military fleet maintain a respectful distance from human territory. 3 years had passed since first contact with the search expedition. 3 years of careful negotiation, limited aid, and growing understanding of just how much the balance of power had shifted. The fleet before her was impressive, by galactic standards. 5,000 ships representing every major civilization. Weapons that could crack planets. Shields that could deflect stellar radiation. It was the combined might of hundreds of worlds. assembled to convince humanity to save galactic civilization. Sarah found it almost quaint. "The Galactic Assembly delegation is requesting permission to board," announced her aide, a young human named David Park. "They're bringing representatives from 47 different species." "How many?" Sarah asked, raising an eyebrow. 47. "They seem to think that showing unity will impress us." Sarah smiled. After dealing with galactic politics for 3 years, she understood the thinking. The Assembly believed that humans were just another species playing the same game everyone else played. Territory, resources, population, military strength. They thought if they showed enough force and offered enough concessions, humanity would return to its old role. They still didn't understand what they were dealing with. "Allow them to board," she said, "but limit the delegation to 20 individuals. Any more would be a security risk." An hour later, Sarah sat at the head of a conference table facing the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Prime Minister Velkas of the Hegemony, General Mortax of the warrior clans, Dr. Velthari, who had become famous for her attempts to reverse engineer human technology, and 17 others, each representing billions of citizens. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us," began Prime Minister Velkas, her tentacles writhing with nervous energy. "The situation in our space has become critical." Sarah nodded politely. She already knew the situation. Human intelligence networks built during 2 centuries of service still monitored galactic space. The reports were grim. Entire star systems had been evacuated as life support systems failed. Trade routes had collapsed when the jump gate network became unreliable. Several wars had broken out as civilizations competed for resources that were once abundant. "We're prepared to offer substantial concessions," continued Velkas. "Full membership in the Galactic Assembly. Territorial rights to any systems you choose. Access to our most advanced technologies. And in return," Sarah asked, "help us rebuild what's been lost. Share your knowledge. Resume maintenance of critical systems until we can train our own people." Sarah leaned back in her chair. Around the table, the alien delegates watched her with desperate hope. These were proud beings who had ruled the galaxy for millennia. Seeing them reduced to begging was almost painful. "Before I respond to your offer," Sarah said, "I think you need to understand exactly who you're negotiating with." She activated the room's holographic display. It showed a map of local galactic space with human territory marked in blue. The area was larger than most delegates had expected, encompassing nearly 1,000 star systems. "This is where we live now," Sarah explained, "but this is where we came from." The map expanded, showing the entire galaxy. New markers appeared, scattered across every spiral arm. Ancient human settlements, some dating back 5,000 years. Archaeological sites on dead worlds. Hidden installations and empty systems. The pattern was clear and shocking. Humans had been everywhere. Long before any of the current galactic civilizations had developed space travel, humans had been exploring, building and watching. "We reached this galaxy while your people were still developing agriculture," Sarah continued. "We could have claimed every habitable world, enslaved every primitive species, built an empire that spanned from core to rim." General Mortax leaned forward, his scales darkening with anger. "Then why didn't you?" "Because empires are boring," Sarah replied. "Ruling over subjects who can't think for themselves is like playing a game where you always win. There's no challenge, no growth, no surprise." She changed the display to show Earth, humanity's original homeworld. But it wasn't the Earth that galactic citizens knew about. This was different, older, a world that had been transformed by technology beyond current understanding. "We come from a universe where we were alone," Sarah explained. "For millions of years we searched for other intelligent life and found nothing. Empty worlds, dead civilizations, echoes of species that never developed beyond primitive tools." The display changed again, showing images of dead worlds. Ruins of civilizations that had destroyed themselves through war, pollution, or simple failure to adapt. The galaxy was full of such places, usually ignored by the major powers. "When we finally found this galaxy, with its hundreds of young species," All developing at the same time, we saw something we had never seen before. A chance for true diversity. Multiple forms of intelligence growing together, learning from each other, creating something greater than any single species could achieve. Alone. Dr. Velthari spoke up, her crystalline body glowing with curiosity. So you decided to help us develop? Not exactly, Sarah said. We decided to see if you could develop on your own. We provided infrastructure support, but only when asked. We never shared advanced technology or tried to guide your political systems. We wanted to see what you would become naturally. The room fell silent. The implications were staggering. Every achievement of galactic civilization, every technological breakthrough, every cultural advance had happened while humanity watched from the shadows. They had been test subjects in an experiment they never knew existed. And what was your conclusion? Asked Prime Minister Velkas quietly. Sarah considered her words carefully. Mixed results? You achieved remarkable things? Art, philosophy, science, exploration. You learned to cooperate across species barriers. You built trade networks and diplomatic systems that allowed hundreds of different cultures to coexist peacefully. But, prompted General Mortax, but you also showed disturbing patterns. You consistently treated less advanced species as inferior. You built your prosperity on a foundation of inequality. You never questioned why some beings were servants, while others were masters. Sarah stood up and walked to the window. Outside, human ships moved through space with fluid grace, their crews working on projects that no galactic civilization could comprehend. When we left your space, she continued, it wasn't because we were tired of serving you. It was because the experiment was complete. We had learned what we needed to learn about your species. Which was what? Dr. Velthari asked. Sarah turned back to face the delegation. That you're not ready to be equals, not yet. The words hit the room like a physical blow. Several delegates started to protest, but Sarah held up her hand for silence. You came here with the largest military fleet in galactic history, she pointed out. You brought weapons capable of destroying worlds. Did you really think that would intimidate us? She activated the display again. This time it showed the space around their current location. The galactic fleet was there, exactly as expected, but so were other things. Structures that hadn't been visible before. Human defensive installations that dwarfed anything the galaxy had ever built. We've been monitoring your fleet since it entered our territory, Sarah explained. Our defensive systems have been tracking every ship, analyzing every weapon, preparing countermeasures for every possible threat. General Mortax studied the display with professional interest. How long would it take you to destroy our entire fleet? Approximately 4 minutes, Sarah replied. But we won't, because that would be wasteful. And because you're not actually here to fight, you're here to negotiate. She sat back down and looked at each delegate in turn. So let's negotiate, but not as equals because we're not equals. Let's negotiate as adults dealing with children who are finally old enough to understand some basic truths. Prime Minister. Velkas straightened in her chair. What do you want? Nothing from you, Sarah said. We have everything we need. What we want is for you to become something better than what you've been. And if we refuse, Sarah shrugged, then you continue. Down the path you're already on. Your civilizations collapse, billions die, and the survivors eventually rebuild something new, maybe better, maybe worse. It's your choice. She stood up again, indicating the meeting was ending. We'll provide humanitarian aid to prevent immediate deaths, food, medicine, emergency power. But we won't rebuild your infrastructure or return to our old roles. The age of human caretaking is over. As the delegates filed out, Dr. Velthari lingered behind. What would it take? She asked quietly. For you to consider us equals? Sarah looked at her thoughtfully. Prove that you can build a civilization that doesn't require servants. Show us that you can treat all intelligent beings with respect, regardless of their technological level. Demonstrate that you can think beyond your own immediate needs and consider the welfare of future generations. How long do we have? As long as you need, Sarah replied. We're patient. We've been waiting for interesting neighbors for millions of years. We can wait a little longer. 10 years had passed since the Great Negotiation. Ambassador Kethver stood at the window of his modest office on the trade station orbiting Kepler 442b, watching supply ships dock with careful precision. The ships were smaller now, their crews more mixed. Zephyrians working alongside crystallines, hegemony officers taking orders from warrior clan engineers. The old hierarchies had shifted out of necessity. The view outside was different too. Where once massive industrial complexes had dominated the orbital space, now there were smaller, more efficient facilities, built by galactic hands using galactic knowledge. They weren't as advanced as what the humans had maintained, but they worked. And more importantly, the people operating them understood how they worked. Ambassador, called his aide, a young hegemony, citizen named Terval. The weekly report from the Reconstruction Committee is ready. Kethver accepted the datapad without enthusiasm. The reports were always mixed. Some worlds were recovering well, their populations adapting to simpler but more sustainable technologies. Others were struggling, their citizens unwilling to give up the comfortable lifestyle that human maintenance had provided. How many more refugees this week? He asked. Approximately 50,000, Terval replied. Mostly from the inner core worlds. They're still refusing to implement the new energy rationing protocols, Kethver sighed. The core worlds were the oldest and most established civilizations in the galaxy. They had grown accustomed to unlimited power, endless resources, and technologies. That seemed almost magical. Accepting limits was harder for them than for younger species who had always lived with scarcity, but the limits were real. Without human maintenance, the old infrastructure couldn't support the same population densities or consumption levels. Worlds that had housed billions now struggled to support millions. The choice was simple, adapt or die. Many were choosing. To adapt, the Outer Rim territories, which had always been more independent, were actually thriving. They had developed new industries, new technologies, new forms of cooperation that didn't depend on having a servant class to maintain everything. Any word from the exploration fleets? Kethver asked. Fleet 7 reports contact with a previously unknown species in the Andromeda approach. They're requesting permission to begin first contact protocols. This was new. For the first time in galactic history, civilizations were expanding outward instead of inward. The collapse of the old trade networks had forced people to look beyond known space for resources and opportunities. And what they were finding was surprising. The galaxy was much larger and more diverse than anyone had realized. There were hundreds of species that had never been contacted by the major powers. Some were primitive, but others had developed fascinating technologies that didn't require the kind of maintenance that had made human services so valuable. Approve the contact, Kethver said, but remind them of the new protocols. No assumptions about technological superiority. No offers of uplift. Full cultural exchange only. These were the humans' terms. In exchange for limited humanitarian aid, galactic civilization had agreed to reform its approach to first contact. No more treating other species as potential servants or subjects. No more assumption that technological advancement automatically meant cultural superiority. It was a hard lesson to learn, but most species were learning it. Kethver's communication system chimed. An incoming message from Ambassador Sarah Chun. These quarterly updates had become routine, but they were always educational. Sarah's face appeared on the screen, looking exactly the same as she had 10 years ago. Humans apparently aged very slowly. Another mystery about their true nature. Greetings, Ambassador Kethver, she said. I hope this report finds your people well. As well as can be expected, Kethver replied. The transition continues to be challenging. Change always is, Sarah agreed. I wanted to update you on our recent activities and discuss some opportunities that might interest your people. The display changed to show a three-dimensional map of local galactic space. Human territory had expanded significantly, but not in the way anyone had expected. Instead of claiming planets or building traditional colonies, they had constructed enormous installations in empty space, ring worlds around stars, mobile habitats that traveled between systems, cities that existed in the void between galaxies. "We've completed our survey of the local galactic group," Sarah explained. 47 galaxies within practical travel range. Most contain intelligent life at various stages of development. Kethver felt his stomach tighten. 47 galaxies. The scope of human exploration made all galactic achievements look tiny by comparison. "We're planning expeditions to several of these galaxies," Sarah continued. "Not for colonization, but for study and potential contact. And we're extending an invitation for galactic species to participate. Participate how? As equals. Partners. In exploration? We've learned much from our interactions with your civilizations. Your perspectives on art, philosophy, and social organization have been valuable. We think other galaxies might benefit from that diversity of thought." Kethver was quiet for a moment, processing the implications. The humans were offering galactic civilization a chance to join them as junior partners in projects that spanned multiple galaxies. It was an incredible opportunity, but also a humbling reminder of the vast difference in capabilities. "What would be required of us?" he asked. "Commitment to the principles we've established, respect for all intelligent life, willingness to learn rather than dominate, and most importantly, the ability to function independently without requiring constant maintenance from others." That last point was crucial. The humans weren't interested in carrying passengers. They wanted partners who could contribute meaningfully to vast undertakings that might take centuries to complete. "How many of our species would qualify?" Kethver asked. "Currently, perhaps a dozen. But the number is growing as more worlds adapt to their new circumstances." After the communication ended, Kethver sat quietly, thinking about the transformation his people had undergone. 10 years ago, they had been the masters of the galaxy, ruling over hundreds of species and controlling resources on an unimaginable scale. Now they were struggling to maintain basic civilization on a fraction of their former territory, but in some ways they were better than they had been. The old galaxy had been built on inequality and exploitation. Entire species had been reduced to servant classes, their potential wasted on menial labor. Now, with the humans gone, every species had been forced to develop their own capabilities. It was harder, but it was more honest. His aide returned with another report. "Ambassador, we're receiving a communication from the Andromeda expedition. They've made contact with a species that has developed faster-than-light communication without using quantum entanglement. They're requesting a full diplomatic team." Kethver smiled. This was exactly the kind of discovery that would have been impossible under the old system. When humans had maintained all the complex technologies, there had been no incentive to look for alternatives. Now, forced to innovate or perish, galactic civilizations were making breakthroughs that might never have happened otherwise. "Assemble the team," he ordered, "and make sure they understand the new protocols. We're there to learn, not to teach." As night fell on the station, Kethver walked through the residential sections. The corridors were quieter than they had been in the old days when billions of beings had moved through galactic space with casual ease. But they were also more diverse. Species that had never interacted before were now working together out of necessity. He passed a laboratory where crystalline scientists were collaborating with warrior clan engineers to develop new power storage systems. In another section, hegemony artists were teaching traditional music to refugee children from a dozen different worlds. The old barriers were breaking down, replaced by new forms of cooperation based on mutual need rather than hierarchy. It wasn't the galaxy they had planned to build, but it might be better than what they had lost. Outside the station's windows, the stars shone with their ancient light. Somewhere among them, human ships were traveling to galaxies whose names no galactic citizen had ever heard. Building wonders that made stellar engineering look simple. Preparing for adventures that spanned cosmic time, the galaxy had wanted its servants back. Instead, it had been forced to grow up. And perhaps, if it grew up well enough, it might someday earn the right to join humanity among the stars. But first, it had to prove it could stand on its own. The lights of the station dimmed as the night cycle began. In the distance, a construction ship was assembling a new habitat module using purely galactic technology. It was smaller and less elegant than what humans would have built, but it was theirs. Built by their hands, maintained by their knowledge. Serving their needs without requiring anyone to kneel. It was a beginning,